Hey everybody, welcome back to The Hobby Musician. On today's video, I'm going to show you from start to finish how you can perfectly level off all the frets on your instrument's neck. Now there could be a variety of reasons why you might want to do this. Maybe you just finished building your own instrument from scratch and you want to make sure the playing surface is completely flat. Or you might have just recently purchased a new instrument or gotten one from a friend and maybe the original work wasn't that great and you just kind of want to touch it up yourself. Or finally, sometimes you might have been playing the same instrument for years and maybe over time some of the frets have worn away in different places and you just might want to go back and tune it up, kind of re-level everything to get it back into pristine playing condition. Well, regardless of the reason, there are going to be some items and tools that you want to get first. So right now I'm going to take you through a quick shopping list of the various things that you're going to need to do this. Now there are three quick kind of points here. Number one, the standard disclaimer, we're not sponsored by anybody here at the channel. So if you hear me mention brand names or specific items, that's just because I did my homework, I spent my own money, and it's the thing that I use. Number two, there are going to be some cases where you can kind of get by with generic kind of knockoff stuff, so you maybe can save yourself some money, but in other cases, it's not worth saving yourself the money. You're gonna wanna go for a specific brand name, and I'm gonna be sure to point those out as we go. And third and finally, I know that this can be a lot of stuff to keep track of, so don't worry. I have made sure to put a complete list of Amazon affiliate links down below this video in a couple of different places. So if you see something that you think would be the right tool for you, go ahead down there and click into it. Now to get started, I've tried to put these in sort of order of the project. The very first thing you're going to want to look at is to get a set of notched straight edges. Now I say a set because what these are straight edges. They're machined flat on their edges, but the companies have gone back and put spacings at the specific spacings where your frets would be depending on the scale length of your instrument. Now, when I originally got these, I bought a multi-pack. It came with several of these with the common guitar scale lengths, and then a couple more with the common bass guitar scale lengths. So you're just gonna wanna make sure that you have one with the spacings for the neck that you have. Now moving on then for some of the prep work, you're just gonna need some masking tape and a Sharpie. Again here, generic stuff is gonna work totally fine. Now to the actual project itself, once it's prepped, you're gonna need a leveling beam. Now, it doesn't have to be specific to guitar world, but the one that I use is a Fret Guru. This is not one where you necessarily have to have a brand name, but it just has to be a machined straight edge that's wide enough so that you can get some of this sticky back, like you peel off the back of this thin sandpaper, and when you stick the sandpaper onto the beam, you know that if it's a flat surface and then now you've got sticky sandpaper on it, now you know that sandpaper is flat. And the length of this is gonna help you get good smooth passes when you're working up and down the neck. Now moving on, this is the first time where absolutely brand name matters. You're gonna want to get a crowning file. Now this one, the one that I use is the Fret Guru, it's the Dagger 2.0. Now I have personally gone through many versions of this. I tried to get cheap ones and it never came out right, and I finally bit the bullet and got this. It is worth it. The crowning file is very specifically machined, so it has that curve down in this groove so that after we get done flattening off the tops, we can come back with this file and recurve the tops to get them nice and perfect for playing. Now the second thing where a brand name is gonna come into it, you're also gonna want to get a fret edge dressing file, and it's this tiny little file in here. This one is from Stuart McDonald, and the reason you're going to want to get this is because it's very specifically designed so that on one edge it's smooth so it can slide without damaging the wood of the fingerboard, but then on the side, so the bottom is smooth, but on the side is where the file is, so you can kind of bend and curve it around each edge of the file to get a smooth surface. So when your fingers slide by it, they don't get caught up on those sharp edges. Now, at the end of it, kind of finishing up the process, you're gonna wanna get some like Q-tips, cotton swabs, some fingernail polish. Again, brand name, this stuff doesn't matter, generic is fine. And then finally, some of these kind of emery boards. These are ones that have multiple different grits on them. Sometimes you'll find them called like micro mesh sticks. They're for hobbyists, you know, people who build little models and stuff. The specific brand doesn't matter, but you're going to want to get something that has like a coarse, medium, and fine side to it, and that's going to be what we use to kind of get that final polish and shine on those frets right at the end. Okay, with all of that out of the way, it's time to get to work. All right, now that we're all set and ready to get started, you may have noticed during some of that intro stuff that it kind of looks like I've already done a few things to the neck, and I have, but it's all just been the prep work for the actual leveling itself. The very first step in prepping this is you need to make sure that the neck is perfectly flat before you come back and try to flatten off the tops of the frets. And what I mean by that is, if you kind of imagine any instrument that's already kind of in playing mode, if it's already been set up and being played, well, there's a natural curve to the neck. It's very slight, but there is going to be some curvature. And if we tried to level off the frets while the wood of the neck is curved, you're not going to get a perfectly flat surface, and it is going to mess things up. So that's where the notched straight edge comes in. What I first did was I got the correct edge for the scale length that I'm working with here, and you can put this on and it will kind of allow you to get the flat parts down to the wood so you can check to see the curve of the neck. Now, if you put this on and if you see daylight underneath or just little gaps underneath any of these, well, then that means it's not yet straight. So you're going to need to get your Allen wrench, and depending on where your truss rod is, sometimes it's at the top, sometimes it's at the back, but you're going to need to adjust it. Either tighten or loosen the truss rod to work with that curve until you can set it so that it is perfectly flat. And you'll be able to know that. You make an adjustment, put this back on. Not quite flat yet, make another adjustment, put this back on until you get to the point where all of these spaces or these little sections are laying flat down on the wood. Now you know you've got a flat neck. Okay, well, once that's done, what's the other prep? Well, you can see here, I have just gone through and very carefully taken masking tape, and I've tried to do my best to get right up to both edges of the frets, cover off the fretboard, just for protection. There's not really a lot that could go wrong, but you'd rather be safe than sorry, so protect those off. Then the Sharpie marker is the last prep stage before we get ready to do some actual sanding. What I have done is I have taken one pass of the Sharpie on the top of every single fret, just made a mark. Now this is a visual indicator because once I've got all these marks, when I now come with the leveling beam, so I know I've got a straight neck and I know that I've got visual markers, we can get our neck right here on nice flat surface. It's supported all under it. We're ready to go. When I take this, I am now going to start to do, it's hard to describe the pressure. I'm not pushing down with all my might, but I'm also not just kind of lightly breezing. I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm putting a little pressure to make sure that it's laying flat, but not a ton of pressure to grind away all the frets. We don't want that. We are going to now kind of lay this down and then kind of holding the neck or making sure that you kind of can do this in a smooth pass. We're gonna now take a pass down the neck. Now, when I take the pass down the neck, several things are going to start to happen. Now, I only did one pass, but I'm going to put some close-up pictures up here so you can see what I'm talking about. But the purpose of the Sharpie marker helps me immediately visualize where the frets were high and where the frets are low, because I can already see here's a fret where some of that line got ground away. Well, that means it was high enough to hit the sandpaper. But the next fret, so here's one that got ground away, the next fret is completely dark. The mark was not touched at all, which means it was not up at the same level. So that shows me, and I can see little bits, there's little bits taken away, and then a fret just randomly that has the whole mark there. this shows me that I do have some high frets and some low frets. So it does need this leveling process. And that's going to be the case with a lot of those the situations we mentioned at the beginning. So, you saw me, I went down that way. You can kind of go back. It's not wide enough to go over the whole thing at once. So you kind of move side to side on these frets. So I go back at the top and come down kind of in just a little bit. Try to make a nice smooth all the way down. I'm going to do a couple more here just to get maybe a pass over the entire kind of length of the frets. And then maybe one more here to get to this edge. And then what you can start to see is, once again, I'm getting visual indicators of where things have been ground down. Now you're going to want to do this, do passes, light passes. It's better to do more light passes than a few really aggressive passes. You're going to want to keep doing this until you get to the point where you can see on every fret from the entire left side to the right side, at least some of that mark has been touched. Now, you don't need it to be completely gone, but it has to be touched and scraped away to some degree by this beam, and then every single fret up and down. And as it never fails, usually when I'm doing this process, there's going to be like one fret somewhere that's just lower than everything else, and it just takes little by little, but you have to do the whole neck just to fix that one fret, because you don't want to have a localized problem just by spending your time there. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to fast forward me doing this, the rest of this, so that we can get ready for the next step. So I'll see you back in just a sec. Okay, everybody, we are now officially done. I got them all leveled off, and it only took about 5 more minutes after I kind of faded out there. But as I said, I was looking to do that until I got to the point where I just see on every single fret, I've just kind of touched or scratched that line. Now, to get through to the next stages, I will just say at this point, technically, in terms of fret leveling, that was the leveling. But we're not done yet. So what ends up happening, as you can imagine, we're going back and forth with sandpaper. So fret wire is designed to have a curve. That way, when you press down on a string, it's only a very, very small point at which the string is contacting that, so that it really helps keep sustain, and it makes the instrument very playable. But now that we have sort of leveled it down, although it's thin, we have created tabletop flat surfaces, and that's not good for playing. So that is why we come back with our crowning fret. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, these are designed to have kind of grooves cut in them at a curve, so that technically, since we've flattened them off, now we're going to come back to every fret and we're going to curve them. But there's a little trick here. We don't want to undo what we've done, all that hard work making them all the same level. We don't want to come back and start grinding away and then maybe changing that level. So this is the trick. We go back to our trusty Sharpie marker, and what I have done is I have reapplied a mark to every fret. So remember, we ground it all away. Well, not all of it, but we ground most of it away. But now I have reapplied a mark to every single fret. And because those frets are now a little flatter, when you do this, and again, I'll have kind of before and after close-ups up here for you. When you do this, you're going to start to notice it visually looks a little thicker than it used to. Now, when we come with this crowning file, and this particular one has 2 different sides with slightly different curvatures depending on the wire or the thickness of the wire you're using. What you're going to want to do is, as long as you keep this straight, so straight up and down, I've got a good grip on it, pressure with my finger on top, I'm going to come and I'm just going to pick one of these frets to start with. I am going to kind of carefully, again, light passes instead of aggressive passes. I'm going to start to grind, keeping this at the perpendicular kind of 90-degree angle. I'm going to take some passes back and forth on this fret. And what you're going to start to notice is that if you check it, you kind of go back and forth a couple of times, maybe a couple more times, that Sharpie marker starts to look thinner, because the flatness is being ground away, ground back to around. So the only thing left is going to be the very tippy top of that shape. And that very tippy top is what we made sure was level across the board. So that thick Sharpie line gets ground down, and you want to leave, don't ground all the Sharpie away, but leave just enough so that you can see a very thin line when you compare it to the frets next to it. And once again, it's easier to see in that picture up there, but you're going to see that you can grind down each of those frets all the way up and down the neck until you have that very thin Sharpie line. And because the Sharpie is still there, you know that you have not affected the very top level of all of those marks. So once again, I am gonna have to go through and do that up and down the neck. So I'll fade out now and we'll come back once I get there. But you saw, that's all, that fret is done. That's all it took to recrown that fret right there. So I'm gonna go back up and down, do this, and I'll see you back in one more minute. All right, we're back, and once again, it didn't take that long after I kind of faded out. Again, about 5 more minutes of just working with that crowning file to get every single fret back to the case where I could see just a razor thin Sharpie mark just on the absolute top of each of the frets. Now, one of the things that the next step that I do is kind of a personal preference. You don't technically have to do this because that last remaining Sharpie mark will come out in the final buffing and kind of polishing phase. But personally, I just prefer to come back with these Q-tips and nail polish remover, and I just dip the Q-tip in some of this and just lightly kind of work over, and I just try to soak up some of that Sharpie mark just to get it off so that it's not there, you know, it makes that final polishing step a little easier. You can see here, these are the used up ones where you just kind of go through, and it's very quick. It took less than a minute to do the entire neck, but you just kind of go through, and I think I can get about 4 or 5 frets with one side, and then I'll dip the other side, do 4 or 5 more, and you really just run up the neck. And now we're back to fully flattened, crowned, and roughly cleaned off frets. Okay, the next, I guess, biggest step is gonna be where we come back to this fret edge dressing file. Now, we said at the top, this is one, again, where the brand name does matter. So I use a Stuart McDonald one, and it is just very well designed to have that smooth bottom that you can rub, so you can kind of rub back and forth. Even if the masking tape wasn't here, I could kind of do that and not be in too much danger of hurting the wood. But then on the vertical sides, you have your rough file edge. And the point of this is to now that the tops are done, I just like to give all of the sides a pass. So if you come here, the technique here is I'm gonna be running this on either side of each of the frets, and as I run it, I'm gonna start to curl my hand in like that, just because I want to grind away or round off just that sharp edge, so that as you're playing, when you're kind of moving your hand up and around the neck and you're kind of grabbing the strings with your fingers, you don't want to feel sharpness. You don't want to move up real quick and feel things catching at your finger. And this is the secret to doing that. So you can see here that basically you kind of get into a rhythm. I'm going to come up, I'm going to set down that flat edge on the neck of the wood. You can hear it kind of contacting there right up against the side, and then as I push forward, I sort of round my fingers in just like that, and I do it about 4 or 5 times. And when you really kind of get a good rhythm, you can then take a look, and you kind of look and you can visually see the difference from one side to the next, that now there is actually less of a sharp edge on this side. So then, because this file has the grinding edge on both sides, you can come on the other end. I gotta find the one, oh, I did this one. You can go on the other end up to it, and again, you're now doing the opposite. So I'm pushing forward and kind of slowly rounding it over as I push to get both edges. And again, it doesn't take a lot, maybe 4 or 5 passes, depending on how you get your technique going. And some of it's personal preference. I don't need a lot of rounding over, but other folks may want a perfectly rounded over. So it can really kind of be to your taste. So this one, unlike the past couple of steps, this one is going to take more than the 5 minutes, just because you really want to take your time. And there's a lot of frets, and there's two sides to both frets, and either left and right. So I'm going to cut now. I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then after I do, we're ready for the last polishing step, and then we're going to be done. So I'll see you back in just a sec. Okay, we're back from that project, and unlike the previous two, as I said, it took a little bit more, so only about 15 more minutes of doing that. So really, if you're keeping track, we're only up to about a total of 25 minutes so far, and we are ready for the very last step. But before we do that, I do want to just mention this kind of as a general pro tip. Even if you aren't doing a full fret leveling on an instrument, sometimes just dressing the edges of the frets can be a very nice touch that you can do to maybe a beginner level instrument or a mid-level instrument, and really kind of add a pro feel to it. Sometimes they just don't have time at the factories, or they're running these things through the machines, and at that beginner level or intermediate level, they don't always have time to make the fret edges feel good. And just running your fingers up and down a neck that has smooth kind of fret edges can make all the difference in the world, make it feel like it's a $1,000 instrument. Okay, so what is the final step? Well, I wanted to make sure that I got all of the filing done before coming back with these little emery board or micro mesh sticks, because we can now use these to buff out the tops of the frets and the sides. Even that doing the filing of the edges can sometimes leave microscopic kind of scratch marks. So these little emery boards are designed so that the grit sandpaper is actually sitting on or glued onto foam core. This foam gives a little bit. So even if you push down onto it, it can it's not going to run the risk of damaging things, because that foam will give and it really just absorbs a lot of that force. So the best technique that I can tell you about is this. We are going to use these particular ones that I get, and a lot of them are the same. There's kind of a coarse, they call it coarse, it's very fine sandpaper, like a coarse, medium, and then the entire backside is like fine. And you really just go through those three sanding processes. So if I come down here all the way to the last fret, I'm going to take the coarse side, and I'm going to give it, just a little bit of a rub, kind of. I'm angling it this way to start on this side of the fret, and then slowly I sort of rotate it. So now I'm on top of the fret, and then I keep rotating it until I get to the other side of the fret, so that in a motion like that, you can kind of go back and forth a couple of times. I'm getting the entire surface of the fret. Now that was the coarse. So now I rotate this and I come to the medium side and I do the exact same thing. You can also hear the sound changes. When that sound changes to more of the sticky kind of sounds, kind of going back and forth, that's telling you the surface is getting smoother, because smooth surfaces will tend to stick. Rough surfaces slide by each other. So you get that kind of back and forth a couple of times on the medium, and then you go, this particular one, the entire back is the fine, the extra fine, and you're going to do the same thing. So I'm getting this, and that sticky set. Now you're starting to get the squeaks. The squeaks are a good sign. The squeaks mean that we really are getting that surface is now down to a shine. And while I have it here, I'm even going to do the same thing to the edges. I'm going to tip the neck on its edge, and that's the edge that we did our fret edge, the small file on. So I do a little bit, I'm kind of going back and forth. You can see I'm wiggling my finger like this to make sure I get the whole surface. And then again, go through all three surfaces. And even just holding it up here, you can almost see in the lights here how much shinier that fret is than the ones next to it, because just something simple like that, that little polishing process, shines them back up and smooths out any of those microscopic scratch marks that you might have. Now you can see I take one fret, and that's why I encourage you to get like a pack of these when you do this. because, you'll get about, halfway down a neck and maybe, you need to switch to a new one. So once again, and for the final time, I'm going to cut, I'm going to go through and do all of this, and we're going to come back and take a look at this final fret leveling job and then kind of wrap up the video. So I'll be back in just one more sec. All right, everybody, we're back for the final time. It took another 10 minutes or so to kind of get everything fully polished up with those emery boards, but now you can see we've got the entire neck, and if I kind of turn it in the lights a little bit, everything's back to a nice high polished shine. This neck is ready to have all the tape taken off, installed, and it's ready to go. So as a quick recap, the whole fret leveling process you can kind of do in less than an hour. We started off with making sure the neck was straight with our notched edge. Then we just leveled everything off with our leveling beam. Then we came back, we recurved them with the crowning file, and then at the end, we just took a little bit of time to make sure all of the edges were dressed up nicely so that your hand moves smooth up and down the neck. And finally, we brought everything back to a nice polish with those polishing sticks. So hopefully you got something out of this video, and I really hope you can see this is a project you can definitely take care of yourself. And don't forget, if you want to check out any of these tools or products, I've got that full Amazon affiliate link list down below the video. So as always, until next time, play on, my friends, play on.